Tonight on Let It Rip.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
President Biden warning that it won't stop with abortion after that leaked opinion from the Supreme Court. Will voters turn out in droves after the potential landmark ruling? But first.
My name is Matthew DePerno, and I will be your next Attorney General.
And tonight he joins us for Let It Rip. He earned the endorsement of former President Trump in the GOP nomination. Why he says he can also earn your vote. Time now to Let It Rip. Charlie Langton is with me as we once again focus on the upcoming November election. We're joined now by West Michigan attorney Matt DePerno. You know, it is good to see you. Late last month, he secured the Republican nomination for Michigan Attorney General and will face off with incumbent Dana Nessel. And tonight, he's here to make his case to voters and answer our questions. And thanks so much for joining us, Matt. It's good to see you here tonight.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We have to begin with the news of the week, the biggest story really in the country. If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, as is expected to happen, would you enforce a 1931 law that would essentially make abortion a felony in Michigan?
I would enforce that law because that is the law, and that's the job of the Attorney General, to enforce the law, to enforce the Constitution. But that's not really what we should always focus on here. What we need to focus on in this debate is compassion. We have to understand and help women who get into this situation. Let's talk about how we do that. When I'm Attorney General, I will focus on compassion with the legislature, and with the governor to figure out solutions for women who get in this situation.
But Matt, for those who get into this situation, to clarify, you said you would prosecute because it's your job as Attorney General. Who do you prosecute? The doctor, the woman, the Uber driver, in some cases in the South, who takes this person to the procedure? Who gets prosecuted?
I think in this situation, anyone who is trying to profit off of this situation. And that's what I'm talking about. How do we solve this problem? How do we deal with compassion for women, right? We need to listen, there's many abortion clinics across the state, but there's also many adoption clinics. All right, there's many families trying to adopt babies in this state. Let's talk about how we help that happen. Let's talk about compassion for how that happens. Let's talk about education, right? Let's talk about solutions for young women who get in that situation.
But Matt, you just recently, as of the other day, said in a video during a campaign stop that under no circumstances is there any medical reason for a woman's fear of her own life being in jeopardy for someone to get an abortion. That's not true. We've talked to several doctors, both here at the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, who say it could be a severe hemorrhage. It could be a fetus that grows outside of the uterus. There are cases in which a woman's life is at risk. Do you still believe that they shouldn't have an abortion?
No, the video you're talking about totally and completely taken out of context in terms of what we were discussing that day. What we're discussing that day was the life of a mother and a viable pregnancy. In those situations, I challenge people to tell me, give me a situation where you have a viable pregnancy and the life of the mother is at risk. That's what we were talking about that day. So in those situations, it is a very, very small percentage of situations where you have the life of the mother at risk in a viable pregnancy. That's what we were talking about that day.
The statute may make an exception to the protect the life of mother. Nevertheless, though, polls that I've seen are about 70% people favor Roe versus Wade. If it's 70%, if those numbers are true, some Republicans must be okay with their choice, the pro-choice. How are you ever going to convince women that the government is the one that should be making a decision on their body and not themselves?
Oh, we absolutely think that women should be able to make the decision for themselves. All voters.
Not to have an abortion, though.
All voters should get to make that decision. That's why Roe v. Wade is largely considered a terrible opinion by many people on both sides of the aisle. It goes back to the 1950s, and they made up a right to abortion out of whole cloth. That's not the way our system of justice works in this state.
Would that apply to same-sex marriage too? Are they the same? We also undo same-sex marriage, because this was very similar to the Roe versus Wade.
But Judge Alito, in his draft opinion, was very specific. And if anyone read that draft opinion, they know that he said specifically that this opinion only applies to the fundamental right to have an abortion. And the justices back in the 1970s, they took that right away from every voter in this country. That's why Roe v. Wade was a wrong decision.
Let me just give one. I remember Republicans talking about the vaccine mandate. You didn't want the government to mandate the vaccine because people should have the right to do to their bodies what they want. Doesn't that apply to a woman having an abortion? Isn't that the same argument?
There's two competing interests in this abortion argument. On the one hand, you have the issue of a woman's right to decide what to do with her body. That's a real interest. And listen, I have two daughters. I love my daughters. I care about my daughters, and I am 100% in favor of women's equality. On the other hand, you also have the life of that baby, and you have to consider that. And Justice Alito even talked about that interest. That fetus has a right to live. So when you're dealing with those two conflicting situations, right, I will always err on the side of life.
Matt, I wanted to ask you one more question about this, and we got to move on to talk about some other topics that viewers want to know about. When it comes to this particular enforcement, clarify this for us. We know adultery is on the books in Michigan as being a crime. We know that that's not prosecuted. We know that payroll fraud, for instance, is on the books. We know that Bill Schuette and Cox both didn't prosecute those. Where do you draw the line and choose to prosecute one thing over another when all these things are on the books?
Well, I think that's been the approach of Dana Nessel throughout her entire 3.5 years so far. She has decided which laws to prosecute and which not to prosecute based solely on her own political agenda.
But wouldn't you do the same thing if it came to some of these other issues and other items?
Not on these most challenging issues that we have in the state. That you cannot compare what you just described to the issue of abortion. The issue of abortion involves the life of the unborn. We always have to protect the life of the unborn in every situation, I believe, because that is what's most sacred in this country.
At conception.
The life at conception, absolutely. I believe that life begins at conception. And I believe that we have to protect that life. Those babies need a chance to live.
The 2020 election, according to so many, including the former president, was stolen. This is something that you've echoed and talked about. How much longer will we have to be talking about 2020 if you become the Attorney General? Will you be looking into that here in Michigan?
Well, let's go back to 2016. If you remember, in 2016, Hillary Clinton said the election was stolen. Stacey Abrams said the election was stolen. Still to this day, Hillary Clinton says that she was robbed of the election. So if they had a concern back in 2016, which they did, which they litigated, which they filed court cases on, which judges allowed Democrats in 2016 to look at data, look at information, what's wrong with doing the same in 2020?
So you would do that as Attorney General in Michigan. You would continue the investigation into the 2020 elections moving forward.
I will continue the investigation into any voter fraud in this state, because that's what's most important. We live in a constitutional republic where we elect our representatives to go to Lansing or Washington on our behalf. If we no longer have faith in the integrity of the election franchise, then how do we continue to exist as a constitutional
everyone
republic?
agrees with that, though, but is it a done deal? The courts have, no court, as I understand, has ever given any credence to the argument that the 2020 election was stolen. None. There have been 50 lawsuits, maybe more.
I don't think that's true. I don't think they've looked at the evidence as to what's happened. They've dismissed cases based on standing, based on mootness, based on issues like that.
Aren't those legitimate legal issues?
Those issues don't look at the evidence that's been presented. What I'm saying is if Democrats and Republicans both share a common interest in making sure that we have fair and free elections, and the Michigan Constitution guarantees purity of elections, then tell me what's wrong with taking a look at the election or doing an audit of the election. Every one of us should agree that we need to make sure that our elections are fair and secure.
How important is Donald Trump to you to win this election?
Well, Donald Trump, listen, a year ago, we were told across the country that Donald Trump no longer had any juice, right? The Republican Party was dead, is what we were told. I go around the state now, I can't find one single person that voted for Joe Biden or wants to admit that they voted for Joe Biden. So Donald Trump, I think, has a lot of influence within the Republican Party. He's still the leader of the Republican Party. He just went 22-0 last Tuesday in Indiana and Ohio.
But if you're wrong, is it risky to be so closely associated with him?
No, I welcome Donald Trump's endorsement.
When's the last time you talked to him?
Probably about 10 days ago.
What did you talk about?
We talked about how convention went. We talked about the governor's race here in Michigan. We talked about things that he cares about in Michigan because he is very interested in the state of Michigan.
Who does he want to run for governor on the Republican side, and who do you want to run for governor on the Republican side?
There's been no decision made about that.
Who do you know them all?
Right, I know them all, but we still have to see what happens with the challenges to ballots, to their signatures. So I don't think anyone's too interested in getting too involved in picking a candidate at this point before we know who's going to actually be on the ballot.
But we're going to discuss all of that when we come back on the other side of this break. And Matt, you're going to join us with our panel here on Let It Rip to continue this discussion on this election. Our panel of political experts will weigh in, and we understand that, Matt, you're not going anywhere. You're going to chime in about this stuff, and you don't want to miss it. We'll be right back with Let It Rip. Welcome back to Let It Rip. As promised, of course, Republican Attorney General candidate Matt DePerno joins us to mix it up on the panel. And on that panel tonight, we're joined now by Oakland County GOP Chair Rocky Rachowski. Next to him, pastor of New Destiny Christian Fellowship Church and civil rights activist, the Reverend Horace Sheffield. Plus, Matt DePerno isn't the only candidate here tonight. We're also joined by Sharon McPhail, former Detroit City Council member, noted attorney, and now Democratic candidate for Congress in the 13th District, and a crowded field it is. And we all know Charlie Langton. We will say it again and again because the man doesn't sleep, the hardest working man in TV and radio. And Charlie, good to see you, and thanks for joining all of us here today in order to talk about this very important discussion. We were talking to Matt a moment ago. Sharon, I'll begin with you. Is there anything in particular you heard this candidate say, if he wanted to become the Attorney General, that you took issue with right away?
I would never take issue with what he believes. He has a right to believe whatever he wants to. But I will tell you that we are looking at a draft opinion, and that abortion is today legal, and that anybody who wants one, who for her own health care and for her own reasons, has the right to go and get one. It has not been overruled. It's a draft opinion. When we see the final opinion of the Supreme Court, we will know what they've done, and then everybody will have their options.
But the 1931 law is one of the options, and it could become a felony in the state of Michigan. And Michigan would stand to be one of the harshest states in the country in terms of the punishment.
Right. It's a really draconian law that would take place immediately. But I think the governor's on it, and certainly we have a lot of people in the state of Michigan who believe in a woman's right to choose. And I think, anybody who doesn't want to have an abortion shouldn't.
Rocky, when you hear people talk about how draconian the law is and how old the law is on the books here in 1931, making no exception for women in this case, does that bother you at all?
Well, I think there should be an exception. Just like Matt DePerno said, there should be an exception for the life of the mother. But and I think Sharon McPhail highlighted it very well, and that is that this will be, if that draft decision is actual law, if it's the decision of the Supreme Court, it would bring it back to the voters of the state. The state's voters, democracy, people would have the right to decide what type of state they want. And that's what Alito, and by the way, let's not forget Ruth Bader Ginsburg, basically one of the justices that the left adored, said that this decision, Roe v. Wade, was poorly drafted, and that actually, that Alito's arguments of giving it back to the states is probably the best thing for us to do. And let the state decide. Let the state legislature decide. Let you and I and Sharon and Horace and Matt DePerno and everyone else decide, as well as those people that are watching today in the state of Michigan. Do we honor life, or do we honor a society that believes that a child is not life?
Well, I'm kind of like not really all the way there, because I kind of think women ought to decide. It's our bodies. There's nobody
agree,
up here who
listen,
can have an abortion except me.
I agree.
Well, not now.
I
but
agree.
I mean,
Unless you've got an iPhone and it shows the meme of the guy. Anyway, I digress.
Right.
You're absolutely right. But at the same time, and I have a daughter, just like Matt was talking about his daughters, it's a compassion issue where you're right. We want women to have equality. I want women to have the same equality and same opportunities as I do. But again, it comes down to, where does life begin? And when we don't know, we have to give it the protection of the law.
But Reverend Sheffield, when you hear people say the same opportunity, like you heard Rocky say just now, does this 1931 law allow the same opportunity to women in Michigan than it would in other places?
Well, let me just say, this whole tenor and tone and where the Republicans are is just frightening to me. I must be honest with you. I mean, I grew up on the Milliken. I knew some really outstanding Republicans, and I would take a whole lot of them over the current bunch. When I listen to him talk, I mean, it's frightening. I mean, I can best say that they're crazy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. For people who look like me, we would be set back, and that's the Michigan, Republican Party. Listen, I'm a pastor, so obviously my own personal choice, my own spirituality. I believe in people, having the choice, but then with me, I would exercise, and by the way, I wouldn't have an opportunity to exercise because I can't be pregnant. But I think that's a person's choice. I mean, and I really think, let me be honest with you, and I've been on here many times, I'm not a racist, but I think a lot of this is rooted in white male anxiety. I call it WMA. It absolutely is.
Matt, when you hear,
and by the way, I would call him DeNono, not.
I got to chime in
real quick,
Rocky.
Matt, we haven't heard from the person who's running for the top cop in the state of Michigan. When you hear someone like Reverend Sheffield say that it worries him, the Michigan Republican Party wants to set people who look like him back.
Right.
It's racist. You're saying it's racist.
The only difference between Michigan and
racist.
Mississippi in 1954 and 2020,
It's racist.
they spelled
Okay.
different.
But Matt, why
No question.
shouldn't that be a concern to anyone who's running for office in the Republican
They don't
Party
care.
to hear that?
Well, it's a concern to me to hear that from anybody, because I'm not racist. The Republican Party is not racist. What we're talking about here in terms of this draft opinion, which may or may not be the final opinion, is the issue of allowing states to choose. Now listen, we have for many years, since the beginning of this country, we have had many thorny issues that we've had to deal with. We've had many morality issues
So
that
was
we've had to
slavery
deal
one
with.
that they had a right to
The
vote?
voters chose Joe Biden.
Let me just share
The
one thing.
voters chose Joe Biden, and there's all in it.
And let me share one very
right now.
important thing.
Republicans
As much
don't
as
accept
I
it.
love and adore and respect you,
Right,
Reverend Sheffield,
right.
you're absolutely incorrect. The Democratic Party is the party of the KKK and Miss Sanger, and the party of Planned Parenthood. And there are more black babies that are killed on a daily basis for abortion.
Why don't you
than they are on the
Why don't you
streets.
get out here and advocate to pay people's rent, fix some roofs or whatever?
Listen, that's where
you guys
we talk
can care
about
less
compassion.
about what happens
Absolutely
to black
not.
people after
Absolutely
they're born.
not.
Yes, you do.
That's
but
why the
then they do
Democratic
before
Party
they're
is
born.
losing.
There's
There's
insane.
obviously, with people who are running for any office in the state
joke.
of Michigan, there has to be someone there to address the fact that there is a fractured population in the state of Michigan, people who feel like they're disenfranchised, and they're afraid, this is fear.
Yeah, no,
people
I
are
agree. I
afraid
get it.
of a party that they believe doesn't see them. How then, Matt, as someone who's running for Attorney General, do you help convince people that you're working for everybody?
Well, I'm working for everybody because that's who I am. Listen, I've been an attorney for 25 years. I came out of relatively obscurity. I ran because I was frustrated with government. I was frustrated because I called my representatives, they didn't call me back. I called everyone in the state I could to voice my opinions about certain issues. No one called me back. And I said, if I can't effectuate change through that process, I will get involved and run on my own.
Do you hear what you're saying, though? Let me just say this. To me, Make America Great is no different than white citizens' parties.
No,
I'm just saying. I mean, you guys you're fooling yourselves. I mean, it's racist in intent, racist in the way it's carried out to keep people from voting and to suggest after all of this.
Where is that?
I mean, it's almost as if
Let's
it's
stop with the
Reverend, in fairness,
only
but
people are
Reverend, hold on a
entitled to be
minute.
a part of this American fabric.
In fairness,
why are you
Reverend,
dividing
Because that's the way Republicans are carried out.
What have we ever done? What have I ever done to make you feel that way? Nothing. Absolutely
Everything
nothing.
you just said before I got up here, it makes me feel more frightened. If you were the Attorney General, you support this nonsense that Trump is talking, you would suppress votes. I mean, you won't even admit that Biden actually won.
Tell me one vote that Matt DePerno would suppress. Matt DePerno has been on the vanguard of fighting to make sure that every vote is counted.
Rocky. You chair of the party, whatever.
No, even if I wasn't chairing the party,
I want to turn things over.
I
want to turn things over to the woman who's running in the 12th congressional district.
Yes.
Who spent her life.
That would be
in
Janice
service.
Winfrey. I'm Sharon McPhail.
Yeah.
I'm in the 13th.
Excuse me. But when we think a little bit about what happens when people go running to the polls because of this issue, because if the Supreme Court ends up overturning Roe v. Wade, in your district, who does that help in terms of the voter turnout? Is it going to be a blue rush or a red rush?
Well, I guess we'll find that out when it happens, but I will tell you that it's an issue that women are very concerned about, and 70%, as you said, believe in a woman's right to choose. So keep it up.
This is a bonanza for money.
But
This
here's
is
the
all
thing.
about money.
Wait, hold on.
This is all
Here's
about
the thing.
money.
Everyone, you and me, should be excited about this Supreme Court decision. You know why?
Why would I be excited?
Because
It allows you
this allows you to have a say in the issue. The Supreme Court,
Amen.
when they handed down Roe v. Wade, which is largely panned as one of the most ridiculous Supreme Court decisions in the last 100 years.
So would Brown versus Board of Education be the same?
They took away.
Let the states decide whether or not we should segregate.
They took away our right.
Reverend Sheffield,
They took away our
would you
right
say
to
that's
have
the
a
most
decision.
democratic way to handle this?
But isn't
to
there
actually hand it to the voters?
But isn't there a constitutional right to privacy, though, seriously?
That's what
That's not the issue.
Women
That's not the
want
issue.
Right
Yes,
to
it
do
is.
what they want with their
Yes,
body,
we
without government involvement. That's
That
a
is not the
Republican
issue.
argument.
Right.
The
Republicans
issue-
don't
Someone else
want
vote on
government
that.
in their bodies.
I've been a lawyer for
It's a Republican.
45 years.
Sharon, go
the
ahead.
right to privacy is a constitutional issue that was the foundation of that decision.
That decision.
I know you don't like
that
it.
That decision was created
but-
by the
Ruth Bader
penumbra.
Ginsburg did
The
like it.
penumbra
and
that
you all
flowed
put a
around.
person on the Supreme Court who had never practiced law a day in her life. Of
Wait a minute.
course
No,
they're
that was
going
the
to come
Democratic
out.
Party in the state of Michigan.
No, that was.
Check it out.
That was. They may
The
have done some
Supreme
stuff. I don't
Court
know.
took away your right and my right to have
No, they
a
didn't.
vote
They
on this
took-
issue.
they gave me
we
my
do not
right to
govern in this
privacy.
country by fiat.
They gave
we
me
govern
your
by
right.
consent.
No, with
and
all
that's
due
what the
respect
Supreme
to
Court
you,
is
sir,
going to say.
Sir, with all due respect to you, where we agree is that your representative should have called you back, and that's why I'm going to do that. I'm going to call people back, and I'm going to hear them, because I believe seek first to understand should be the rule. And even though we don't agree, I listen to you because you have a right to express your opinion to your representative. And I will listen to people. But I still want to have autonomy over my own body. You must understand that. If we decide to pass a law about what you do with your parts, how are you going to feel about it? No, seriously, Wade, he's answering a question, Rocky.
That's the question.
Be quiet, Rocky.
Where does life begin?
Reverend Sheffield, I want to end with you
It
on this
begins with
particular
him.
part of this
'Cause
discussion.
if he's not there.
We know that the Republican Party, so many people or candidates depend on Trump for the support, and they want to ride that Trump wave. If someone rides the Biden wave, are they better or worse off for that, given his approval ratings right now?
To be perfectly honest with you, prior to this Supreme Court leak, I would probably run for Biden. But what the Republican Party, I mean, that's just me, to be honest with you. I mean, Biden is sinking in the polls. I mean, I think it's not fair. I think he's done a good job. But yeah, I wouldn't run based on Biden, but I wouldn't run based on Trump, even if Trump was at 98%, because my conscience wouldn't allow me to run to support a bigot or racist and someone who's dividing this country.
Again, we keep throwing up these things.
He's true.
Show me
just look at what the man does.
Reverend Sheffield, Rocky, we're going to take break. We're going to give you both a chance
the
to talk.
Germans benefited from Hitler, so that make it right.
We're going to give you both a chance to talk.
This man is a nut. This man is anti-patriotic.
Reverend Sheffield, we're going to wrap it up in just a second.
Right
talk about.
When we come back, we're going to hopefully have some room for some final thoughts. That's coming up next.
Yeah.
20 seconds left here for Sharon McPhail running the 13th district.
Thank you. I want to use this time to tell women all over the state of Michigan that as of today, you have the right to choose. This is a draft opinion. No one knows what it's going to look like when we get to the end of it, but you have the right to choose as of today. Make your choice.
Sharon, thank you. Matt DePerno running for Attorney General.
Yeah, thank you. I want the vote of everyone in this state because I will fight for everyone in the state. Republicans, Democrats, and independents will return this office back to the law firm for the people and protect the rights of everyone in the state of Michigan.
Matt DePerno running for AG. We're going to make an effort to get all of the candidates that, of course, are running for office as much access as we can on the show. We thank you for watching this edition of Let It Rip.